Hi, we're live. I think I guess we don't wait for people to show up. Oh, here come people. All right. Hello, Lisa E., Erica, and Journal Lisa. This is Alona Juanis. I write The Pebble in Your Shoe, a publication here on Substack. And today my guest is Mary McGreevy, who I happened to find on TikTok. And I found her work there fascinating. And then all of a sudden, one day she popped up on Substack, and I'm like, oh my gosh, is
Mhm.
this the same lady? And so anyway, I reached out and I thought you guys would love her because I am super fan of Mary's. And so this is Mary McGreevy from Tips from Dead People, correct?
Mhm. Correct.
And so today, Mary's joining us to tell us a little bit about her journey from, uh, what was your job before? Oh gosh, already screwing
Yeah,
up.
no problem. I was a video producer.
What a video producer,
Mhm.
and then her job ended, and she ended up here. So tell us a little bit more about how you came to be a TikTok and Instagram phenom.
Um, for a certain demographic, maybe. But, yeah, so my background is I was an English major, didn't know what to do, and after college, I joined this program called the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, which is kind of like AmeriCorps, and you get assigned to a high service need area of the country, and you commit to living and working in a community that you're serving. And there's all kinds of other JoJo volunteers in your program. So here's little me from South Dakota. I got assigned to do a year in New York City, living in Brooklyn with three other volunteers. And I was a social worker. So I didn't have social work experience, but I immediately became a social worker in Manhattan. Crazy.
That's
Uh, Probably one of the most eye-opening years that I could ever imagine, but really great, a great year. And then I stayed for another 2 years. I loved it so much. And then I went to graduate school because I was very intent on this nonprofit journey to to get a master's in public policy and public administration. So then for the next few years, I was the executive director of a health clinic down in Texas on the Texas-Mexico border. And then I took like a decade formally off when I had 3 kids right in a row, and we moved to Minnesota, where I live today. And then I did a big pivot. I had a friend who was the founder of a video production company, and she was looking for director producer help. And she gave me the opportunity to learn on the job, essentially, which I did. And then I stayed with it for over 15 years. So that's how I got into video production, surprisingly, using a lot of my same social work skills. So that's the background professionally. I was never like the creative person behind the videos that we produced for companies. It was more like the business client management side of things. Um, but I have always been a lifelong obituary reader. My mom was temporarily the obituary editor for my hometown paper in South Dakota. And I think I must have just been at an age where I was paying attention to that and starting to read the obituaries and starting to notice what is said and more importantly, what isn't said. So in all those cities where I lived, I would get the hard copy subscription. I would immediately look at the obituaries, or as I guess the Irish sports pages, as some people call it. First and foremost, I would cut out good ones. So then a few years ago, I was in the midst of a very big work project, pretty stressful. And I thought, I don't have any hobbies. Like I don't sing, I don't knit. I'm not a crafter of any kind. But I have this stack of obituaries, and I wonder if anyone besides me would ever be interested in that. So at that time, my three daughters were in their 20s, and I asked them, if you were going to share some of this stuff on social media, like what platform would you use? And of course, if a cringe were audible, that was their first reaction. Now they're my biggest fans, but back then I was like, "What? Our mom's gonna do what?" Ugh. But they did recommend TikTok as that at that time being sort of less polished, less curated. Maybe you could make more
What year
mistakes.
was this? What year?
This was 2022. And so I just started making a couple little videos, not really sure of my voice or how long they should be or what I wanted to say. It was very, very basic, very minimal editing. And after a few months of that one particular video, I don't know how it happened, went viral. It had to do with food poisoning, people dying of food poisoning. And all of a sudden, it was this classic thing where I thought, this is kind of weird, but I posted it, went to bed, woke up, and there were over 1 million views and like 2,000 comments. So after that, I got put, I think, on a little bit faster highways on TikTok. And then once all the political ban stuff started happening with TikTok, I thought, I need to not put all my eggs in one basket. So I started on Instagram. I recently started cross posting so I can do one video. I can put it on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all at the same time with one of these little.
Oh, so you're on YouTube too.
Yeah.
Well,
So I use this program called Repurpose where you can make one video and send it out to all those places at once, which is awesome.
yeah.
Um, it's still very basic editing, nothing fancy. But over the couple of years, I feel like I've come into my voice. I've started to figure out what is meaningful to me and therefore maybe meaningful to other people. And it isn't just, I mean, it's a clever idea, I guess, but it isn't just that. This idea that other people's stories can help you figure out meaning for your own life is incredibly powerful for me. It has changed my brain for the best. And I love that the feedback that I get from people, commenters and followers is that it is doing for that for them too. So it's fun, it's entertaining, it's a little gossipy, which I love, but it's also has the potential to really help change people's perceptions of their choices. What does success mean and what doesn't it mean? So anyway, that's a very long answer to a short question, but that's how I got here.
Okay. So let's back up to when you started being interested in it. And I have to say, I share the same fixation on obituaries. I used to read them from the Philadelphia Inquirer when I was young.
Mhm.
And why was I reading them? I don't know. Like a
Right.
lot of them were basic, like we discussed earlier, like father worked here, did this resume kind of obituaries. But then you would find one that'd be like, whoa, what's this? And it would spark you. But I don't know what that is. And maybe you as a social worker have some idea, like, what's this attraction to reading about people that have died? Like,
Yeah. Well, s- let's see. If you look at something like Humans of New York or
oh,
StoryCorps or
yeah.
the Moth, you can see that real, authentic, messy stories have been fascinating forever. So I think that's sort of like at a basic level. I think for me personally, why I continue to be obsessed, I think that's an accurate term, obsessed with them, is that I never really knew what it is that I wanted to do career-wise. I had great jobs and I feel like I was very good at them, but I didn't have that same kind of path that a lot of people do where they know from college age or whatever, here's what I want to do and I'm just going to go with it. So I think I've always been especially curious about other people's journeys um, in their obituaries. Like, what was their path? What choices did they make? And if it's linear or if it's not, and does it convey like the good life? And what I've learned over reading thousands of probably 10,000 obituaries is that the linear path or the external metrics of success that so many of us are taught has zero to do with the the perception that they've lived a good life. It's almost always more about the little things, even the mess, the contradictions, the failures, the setbacks, the regrets. But when there's humor and acceptance and diversity of experience in your life, that comes through in these obituaries. And so that's the type of interest that holds me day to day. And I just think it has taught me so much about letting go of feeling like you were less than because you didn't have XYZ markers of success. It's not true. It's not true. And if I could have known that at age 18, I think my life would have been quite different. So that's part of what compels me to keep sharing, is because I think this could have the same effect for other people, but in this kind of stealth way, which is like fun storytelling.
Well, I had the same experience. I mean, we were taught to follow a certain path, and I think now is so nice, actually. I mean, there's a lot of pros and cons, but right now you could really, like, this is such a weird thing that you started, you just followed the path and then voila, exploded. But, one of the things that I like about the obituaries that you read is that the writer, and I think it's mostly when the children or family members write it, is that they accent the imperfections, but they love this person maybe more because of their imperfections, and they highlight them, and they're funny, and they're like, "Oh my god," like that one lady, she sort of, like, wasn't a mother. That was one of your recent ones. She was just like, "Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
really, like, into
Yeah.
mothering." And her daughter wrote the
Yeah.
obituary. I just
Yeah.
that it was just so human, and
Yeah.
yeah.
I totally agree. And I think it's most poignant with women of a certain generation who maybe like that woman you're talking about, Thelma, that's a recent one, that I shared, who felt like they were maybe born in the wrong generation, where they were slotted into a particular role in the home, and as much as, many people love that, it wasn't a fit for them, and so they had to make peace with that somehow because that's the historical timeline that they were born into. And so the generosity of the people writing the obituary, talking about their flaws. The one that I read a long time ago that always sticks with me, and a very imperfect woman, but very smart. The last line, "We loved and cherished her despite and because of it all." And that's just the kind of thing that brings me to tears sometimes, because this woman is seen in her complexity. She's not judged for it. Everything wasn't easy, for the family members of this woman, but they saw the big picture at the end and they valued her for the complexity of it. And I just hard to imagine a better gift. And I think sometimes too, when you're missing your person, who's died, and you wonder in the middle of the night, like, how am I gonna like feel that connection again? If you go back to an obituary that is just a copy and paste airbrushed template with just basically a resume, that's not gonna make you feel that connection. But a story like this that talks about the ups, the downs, everything like that will. And I know that personally from my own mom dying. So
And I think that your point is well taken, that we are such complex human beings, and you can't, some of the obituaries that we read are just so one dimensional. And when you all that like complexity, it's just so beautiful. And I remember like one of the things you said, maybe you said it repeatedly in different ones, is that you are not the worst thing that ever happened to you. Like,
mhm,
and we all have something like that that happens to us. And then but that's not what people remember necessarily.
mhm. Yeah, and that comes up a lot with addiction, because if it's a self-written obituary from someone with addiction issues, what comes across is there was a point in their life where they thought they would never get out from under that worst chapter. But the data, if you want to call it that, that I see in obituaries is that there's almost always, even at a very advanced age, there's almost always another chapter around the bend, and you can acknowledge the parts of you outside of that worst chapter. Even people I've read about who were incarcerated, definitely addiction, estrangement, or dissolution of relationships or whatever, there is repair. There's a different arc possible for almost everybody. And that's hard to know, hard to see if you're going through it right now at this moment. It's hard to see. But I get this delicious perspective of reading about people's lives at the end backwards, and I can see it so clearly.
Mhm.
We are all more than that.
You didn't tell me that you used to be a social worker till just now, and I feel like that is such a uh, it's why you're so good at this, because you have so
Oh,
much empathy, and you can you get the message like that
mhm.
maybe some of us would miss from the words. And that's one of the nice things about your videos is you read the obituary, then you put your 2 cents in. So
Mhm.
a little bit about the project you're working on now,
Mhm.
writing the deadline that you're working under.
Yeah. So one of the greatest, coolest things that has come out of this whole unlikely social media journey is that a few organizations have asked me to speak to them, large and small organizations, everything from large healthcare organizations to small library groups, about the top things that I've learned from dead people. And it is a recognition of people's individuality. So it doesn't even have to just apply to like the death space or the library space or the storytelling space. It's for any group that wants to have a interesting, unique, new perspective on people's individuality and kind of what matters in life. And I've had such great feedback from it. And it's really like I said, one of the most fun things. But last year I gave a speech to a group of women creatives in California, everything from people dressed in Gucci to dressed like Minnie Mouse. It was the craziest, best group of women. And of course, women are primed for good storytelling. So I gave a speech about the top things that you can learn from dead people and how storytelling is all part of it. And after that, I had conversations with a couple literary agents who were connected to me through that experience, and um, signed with an agent, and we worked on a proposal for a book last summer and sent it out to a lot of publishers. We only got one response, but it happens to be a great response from HarperCollins. So I'm working on a book. It's a compilation of some of the favorite videos that I've shared, or the favorite obituaries that I've shared over the last couple of years. And it's been really joyful to go back and revisit so many of the ones that I shared early on, get in touch with the families if I can, because I need to get their permission. I don't usually have to get permission just to share on social media, but I do for this. So it's been this kind of joyous, new creative project, stressful in a way because there's deadlines involved, but to revisit some of those interesting ones and to reconsider and write about what I pulled from that. So it unfortunately the production timeline for books is so long, it won't be out until August of 2027, but I'm in the thick of finishing it now. So that's publishing, which I'm not a writer really, so I had no idea about any of the behind the scenes mechanics of all that, but people are shopping for holiday 2027 books, big, big stores in the summer of 2026, which it's
Wow,
hard to fathom, but that's the way it is.
that's the way it works, huh?
Mhm.
So how do you decide? First of all, you must be very organized with these obituaries, but like, how do you know you didn't already do that one? Like, do you have some organizational method? And then do you have like your top 10 that you like file and that these go in the book, or
Mhm.
what's your method here?
I love that we're talking about project management and organization because that's the kind of person I am. I was lucky enough to be introduced a couple years ago to this project management system called Notion. I don't know if you and
Yeah, I
your
know Notion, yeah.
Yeah. So the bad thing about it is that it's totally customizable, and I don't know how to do that. Like, I'm not a whiz at that kind of stuff. But the good thing about it is that it's totally customizable. So I actually hired someone to set up a Notion space for tips from dead people, and it has served me so well. But so people will send me an obituary. I'm getting dozens a week at this point. I have a queue that could go out for 5 years, I think, either by DM or email or some other kind of message. And um, I'll make a Notion page for each of those obituaries. I'll put the link there. And then the person who sent it to me and their contact information, when it came in, through what channel. And then the most important part is that you can tag each of those pages. So any obituary that I use will probably have 8 to 10 tags: funny, military, addiction, food, multicultural, whatever. But one of the tags, or a couple of the tags I have, best of, and then I have Pulitzer. So when I was looking,
Your best.
yeah. So when I was looking for candidates for the book, I was able to go into the archive of 400 or plus videos that I've done and just pull out the ones that said Pulitzer. Can I get in touch with their family? Will this be a fit for the book? Is it too long? Is it too short? Whatever. Then I went to the best ofs. And then I went to, I think I'm heavy on women. I think I need a couple more men. So I was able to just use my filtered system and just start pulling a cast of characters, basically. So
Yes.
that's been really, really great. And if someone says to me, "Hey, what was that one you did a couple of years ago that involved whatever, a pet?" I've got animal is one of my tags, so I can go in and pull up all my animals.
Oh, wow. Because you do literally read hundreds, right, of
Mhm,
these a week.
mhm. Yes, I do. Yes, and not obviously.
Them to you?
Pardon?
Because people submit them to you, or you just
Yeah.
you get them?
I it initially, when I first started, I was finding all my own because I had a big collection myself, and it's just a hobby that I love to do. But then once I got over, I don't know, probably 10,000 followers or something, and then now there's like around 400,000 across the different platforms. Then people start sending me ones either that they saw in their community or is a friend or someone that they sort of half know, or it's part of their family, or they actually wrote it themselves for someone. So there's all that level of closeness to it. And I read them all because I want to honor the fact that people are sending these to me. I can't make a video about them all because there would never be enough time. But I like to read them all, and I like to send a little message back to people when they send.
So, I know you probably always wanna have this pipeline coming in. So if people wanna send you one, how do they do it?
The easiest for me is email, which is tipsfromdeadpeople@gmail.com. And I have on all my social platforms, including Substack, I have a link that goes to all my contact information. So it's not hard to find me. And I do look at DMs and stuff like that, but just not as quickly as getting to email.
Mhm. Okay, so you have, I don't know, 170,000 followers on Instagram, 190 on TikTok. What was it like when you started getting Katie Couric on your like, she liked your or was a follower of yours, like, who are drop some names. Who's following you that we'd be
Oh, yeah, that's so fun. Well, yeah, Katie Couric started following me. I did a story a few months ago about it was a self-written obituary by a woman named Nora who she was an addict and her sister sent it to me, so I felt quite comfortable using it. If you haven't seen that one, if you're watching this and you haven't seen that one, you should go back and watch it. It's probably like, 8 videos ago or whatever. But it's so powerful and on Instagram, especially if your video is under 3 minutes, it gets put into reels, which then gets shoved out to strangers, not just your followers. And that one was short and impactful. And it just, I don't know, immediately got up to like 1 million views. And that's how Katie Couric followed me. And she said something like, I love this. I love stories too. And she's liked a few things since then. And that also then, I noticed one day that Anderson Cooper and his podcast both followed me, and I don't know if that's, like, his people or if it's actually him sitting on the couch, but, a long time ago, Sharon Stone followed me. This is just so random, the guy who plays young Sheldon on television followed me, Sophia Bush. Um, yeah, there's a few like that, and then in the death space, there's quite a few, like, hospice nurse Penny, hospice nurse Julie, and people like that follow, and I'm so grateful because I so admire their content too. Um, yeah, I know there's more that I'm just not pulling up in my head right now.
good for
Yeah.
fun. So what makes, like what do you say are the elements that make an obituary good or what
Mhm.
attracts, like readers like me say, oh my God, this is a great obituary. I can't even say. It's just like the human element, I guess, for me. And
Mhm.
I feel like I know that person
Mhm.
and I can like sort of join in on the collective grief of having lost that person. I mean, that's kind of like out there, but I just, I don't know. It makes me have feelings.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think well, to that question, I usually say, first of all, what not to do. I would say don't Google how to write an obituary. You can tell right away that it's templated. AI is a helpful tool if you give it the right prompts. Like, here's some facts of my mom's life, but I don't want this to sound like a resume. I want this to be unusual, or I want it to be in the style of David Sedaris or whatever. In order to, for me, this is just for me. Who cares really? But I care. You have to give it very specific prompts. But in terms of what to do, I would say yes to acknowledging the genealogy of it, the survivors, the facts or whatever, how they died. But to me, the most important things are the tiniest details. Like, honestly, nobody cares about your resume. Hardly anybody cares about your resume. But like I shared one maybe last week, and the daughter wrote in the obituary, he never got over the fact that Speed Stick deodorant discontinued their musk scent. And I was like, that's worth every line, every character in the line that they put it on, because I will never forget that. It's gently teasing the person, but it's loving, you can tell. Um, the like you say, the honesty, the authentic knowledge, and sometimes that's positive, sometimes it's a mix, sometimes it's negative. And I actually love those too. I call them scorched earth obituaries. It's kind of like the world was a better place.
Oh, I know. I remember that one. I
Mhm.
was like, whoa. But I mean, I'm
And I'll share some of those that are either that bad, like that negative, or even slightly more mixed. And I brace myself for very negative comments, like why speak ill of the dead and this is so rude and stuff. But every single time, I would say 90% plus of the comments are more to the effect of they have to tell their story. This is their experience. They get to say what their experience of this person was. Um, Kudos to them for saying it. And I agree.
how many of the obituaries would you say are written by the person who's deceased?
More than used to be. All I can go by is what's sent to me. And I would say mm, for every 50 that's sent to me, I'll probably get five that are self written.
Mhm.
But I've also had so many people message me over the years, the last couple years, to say, because of this obituary, I'm writing my own. I'm starting just a list on my notes app, and it's either going to be that, the little bullet points, the lists, or that's what's going to get, shot out to my kids or my family or whatever who's going to write that. And I think it's happening more. I think people are okay with um, kind of like assessing regret at the end of their lives and putting that down somehow. And there was one guy whose obituary I shared, and it was self-written, and he had written it, I think, like a year before he died. But he sounded like, not everybody has to be literally literary. He sounded kind of like a frat guy. But he was basically like, I think might have been a bully when I was younger. And now that I'm looking back, I really want to apologize for that. And it was a short, kind of funny, brusque obituary, but that really struck me as like, he's he took the time, and then his family kept that in there. Kudos to them too. So, yeah, more and more, I think, but not the majority.
Mm. Well, I think the pluses of writing your own obituary is that you get to think about how do you want to be remembered, and you can write those things, but it also sharpens how you live your life because
Mhm.
you think about your legacy. You can write it, but like you actually have to live it, and those words have to be true. Like you could write a total nonsense obituary that nobody would buy, but you could also write a real one about where you fell down and just the love that you feel for your family and your
Yeah, I shared one recently, a self-written one from this woman named Anne from Northern California, and it struck a lot of people, especially women. But she did a lot of cool things in her life. But toward the end of her obituary, she said, um, I wish that I had listened to that little girl inside me who wanted a bigger voice sooner. I pushed her down, but it was always this little stream bubbling below the surface. When I finally let her voice out, my life was so much better. I wish I had done it sooner. And I think that resonated with a ton of people, especially women.
Mhm. Yeah, have you written yours?
No, I haven't. No. I have a few little notes on my notes app, but I go back and forth between thinking I have to have that control, I have to write it, and maybe I will, I don't know. But I also think, I don't know, maybe my kids would have fun with it. What will I care at that point?
You care because someone's gonna be reading your obituary.
Yeah, that's true, that's true. Who's gonna take on the mantle of Tips from Dead People? Oh my god.
I really think it's important that you would write your own. Sorry. I mean,
I mean, I suspect that I will, but I'm not quite there yet in my head.
yeah, yeah. So what would you say, is important for people to, maybe put in their obituary? Like something that
One of my most favorite tips is just do a bulleted list. Doesn't have to be bullets in the obituary if you want, but it could be, of things you love, but equally important, things you hate. So one of the women who's going to be in the book and is like one of my all-time favorite obituaries is this woman named Trish. And I think her high school friend wrote the obituary, and it's funny and it's good a good length, but at the end it said, here's what Trish loved, colon. And then it was all these things, probably 20 things. David Sedaris, square shaped bullet points, long and lean trousers from the Gap, Capri candles, like Skittles, all these kinds of things.
it's so easy to
And
do.
and then the next paragraph was, here's what Trish hated. And I almost loved that more. It was like cold butter, the PBS cartoon Caillou. I mean, it was like really specific and an equally long list. And then at the end, the next line was the end. It said, she rarely shanked it, true story. And I just thought, like, I've used that in my speeches as an example of like lists that seem trivial but are really everything. And often what I'll say is like, your metrics for a good life cannot be found on LinkedIn. The most important metric is, are you going to be a person who's interesting to sit next to at dinner? And I would 100% rather sit next to Trish talking about cold butter and David Sedaris than I am talking about anything else.
Mhm,
Second homes, car brands, anything like that. So to me, that's like a huge success. And it's so easy to do because when you start making those lists, hated cilantro, hated this, hated this, the stories start to kind of flow from there. And that's it. That's life. The way you live your days is the way you live your life. I think
mhm,
Annie Dillard said that, and it's so true.
mm. I really am impressed with the ones where the family writes after the person has taken their own life, and they write about the person. I just feel like it's such a balanced view, and, um, it really humanizes, like, 'cause once that happens, everything, like, changes in the exterior world as the person is viewed, and then when I read the obituary, I'm like, "That wasn't his only thing." Like, there was so much to this person, and I feel like those are the really, like, kinda special ones that stick out in my mind.
Yeah, I think one of them, there was a quote from one of the people who died by suicide, which said, if our loved if our love could have saved her, she would have lived forever.
I know. That's
And I mean, that's definitely an example of you are more than your worst chapter. Obviously, it's not going to happen like I was talking about, where there's a new chapter around the bend, but this is more in telling this person's story. They are more than that incident. they were also a teacher. They were an artist. They made people laugh. They, all whatever the other things are about their life,
Mm.
they just couldn't turn off the white noise that would allow them to see those things in the same way that their family saw them. And that's incredibly brave. And I feel like being honest about that, about dying by suicide, is probably a modern development that you would never have seen
Right.
50, 40, maybe even 30 years ago.
You're right. You're right.
Mhm.
I mean, you can't even like say that word on TikTok, right? If you say it, it's
Right.
you have to be
Everybody on social media says unalive.
unalived. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, I want to tell everyone we only have about 10 minutes left. So if you have any questions for Mary, please type them in the chat and I'll read them to her. While you're thinking of questions that you have to ask Mary while we have her here, I do want to ask you about epilogue.
Mhm.
Are you still doing that or tell us what that's about?
So when my mother-in-law died in 2015, she lived in Dallas and she wrote her own obituary and it was really long. And we, of course, just put it in the Dallas Morning News because if someone writes their own obituary, you're going to put that in there. And she was a great storyteller, a very interesting Southern woman. But it was $1,200 for a day. And that was back in 2015. And at the time, I thought, why is there not a site like The Knot, the wedding site? Why is there not a site just like that, but for death, where it's free to the consumer? Sorry. You have creative control, but it's free to post, and whatever business or merchandising happens is happening on the back end. But to you, the consumer, you can tell the story the way that you want to tell that, and you don't have to deal with classified ad style pricing, which is how newspapers have already operated and how always operated, and don't even like we could do a whole other hour on the business operations of obituaries, which I have so many thoughts about. So some friends and just started a site called Epilogue, which is a free obituary site, and it's very small, but it works if you. A lot of people use the funeral home sites now, which are free in that they're not an addition to what you're already paying a lot for at the funeral home. But they don't always look great. And then everything gets eventually housed on legacy.com, which is also not awesome. So it's a different option for people. I'm not really involved anymore.
Other
Other
people.
people, yeah. So other people are managing that. I don't have any day to day things with it, but I think it's a great idea. And there's a couple other sites like that, like Keeper Memorials and Everloved,
Okay.
that's
Oh,
the whole concept.
okay. So that was the only one I had heard of. I guess I'd done research on you then and that you were associated with that. So that's just a site you submit your, your obituary plus photos and whatever, and then it lives there forever or
Yeah. hmm It's very basic. There's nothing fancy about it, but it's free.
okay. Oh, we have a question here from Lazarus in New Jersey. Have you rejected any mean-spirited obits?
It's a good question. I let's see. Uh, there was one that went viral recently for a woman named Kathleen Demlow. If you want to look her up, Dehmlow. Not that I shared, but a lot of people sent it to me because it kind of went viral, and it was yeah, it was very mean spirited. And I actually don't. I did for some reason I didn't share that one because the link got taken down, or I wasn't able to share the link with it. And I didn't just want to put like a screenshot. When I share an obituary, I want there to be a link so people know that this is legit. We're not faking anything, or someone's not sending me a fake obituary or whatever. So I didn't end up sharing that one, but not really because it was mean spirited, more just because it didn't work logistically. I shared one a few years ago, actually, that also went kind of viral, not because of me. It had already been kind of viral, and a bunch of people sent it to me, that felt kind of mean spirited. But again, like I was saying before, shocking to me is that people in the commenters are supportive.
Mm.
So
Remember that one you wrote, and we talked about this a few minutes ago about how it was not a positive read about the person, but somehow it didn't come across mean spirited. It was just like, this was our experience with our dad. Like, this is,
Well, there was recently one about this woman named Barbara that I did share that got a lot of response on both TikTok and Instagram. And the gist of it was this was her basic life. Um, she was not a great mom, and we did not have contact with her at the end because of past hurts, but we made sure to pay for her apartment. This was the most and the least we could do, or something like that. And it was like, oh, that's an interesting thing. Like, basically saying we supported her because that's our role as kids, but we didn't love her and we weren't in touch with her. I mean, that's very nuanced. But again, surprising to me, people were very supportive of that approach.
mm. Yeah, let's just talk a little bit about this gap now. You just provoked a thought because, when my parents died, it was in the last 10 years, and newspapers are sort of like, I don't subscribe to any newspapers. And there's just like, how do you let people know that someone's passed? Well, I know Facebook has taken that, and people write beautiful tributes on Facebook on there, but like, who wants to pay, $1,300-$2,500 for a little tiny obituary in the newspaper? Like,
It's
well,
insane.
these obituaries that you're getting, are these two like regular publications, like media?
It's a mix. Some people do pay it, and they're bangers. They're good obits. I'm glad they paid it, but then sometimes a lot of newspapers have a behind the scenes relationship with legacy.com, so it'll be on like the Tampa Bay Times for 2 weeks, for example, and then everything gets shifted over to Legacy. There's a financial relationship that those companies have in the back end. But there's some smaller level newspapers, like community-wide newspapers that we probably all have a sense of, but for example, there's one in Berkeley, California called the Berkeley Side, and they made a conscious decision to make all their obituaries free, and they talk about it on the front page of their homepage. And the paid subscribers went up because they made their obituaries free. And I go to that site all the time just to read for fun because there's such great obituaries because they're free
Mm.
and because it's Berkeley, probably they're so interesting. They're diverse and funny and quirky and interesting. And I have this intuitive sense that it's because they're free. And so I think if I were the publisher of a newspaper, it's very hard to take away a profit center. But newspapers lost classified ads to Craigslist, and they are going to lose obituaries in the same way. They're just going to. So if a newspaper, in my opinion, were forward thinking enough to make all obituaries free on their site, it would remain this community hub in the way that it's fading for so many newspapers because they can't let go of that cost center. And I mean, I get it, but
It just
I
seems
don't agree.
kind of mean, like this is people
I mean,
that
it's ad space, it's line space.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole and that brings up all kinds of equity issues with who can pay to tell their story. If a newspaper is considered the source of truth in a community over the last 200 years, you go back and look at the obituaries from 100 years ago, you're not going to get a sense of any diversity in that community because who could pay for it? Who could pay for those obituaries? So there's all kinds of equity issues around the pay to play model as well.
Absolutely. I never even thought of that. You're right.
Mhm.
All right. Well, we're getting near the end of our time. So if people want more tips from dead people, where should they go?
Well, first of all, I see some questions and comments here. If you want to reach out to me through Substack or email, please feel free to do that. But yes, Substack for me is kind of a fun place to experiment with writing of all different kinds. So it's not really um, it's not a huge presence for me, but I love it. I just love the experimentation part of it. I would say Instagram is probably the main place to come find me, but again, the videos that I post to Instagram are the same ones that are on TikTok and same ones that are on Facebook and now YouTube.
And we'll look forward to hearing more about your book when that comes out. One more question. Lazarus from New Jersey again. Have you ever thought of a spinoff where you publish eulogies? Or is that too difficult to access people's eulogies? You're not really in that space, right? Are you?
No, and, um, what I offer, so I'm sure people are familiar with what a link tree is. That's basically what I have now. I don't really have a main website. So if you go to my link tree, I put the link to every obituary that I share on that link tree. And I think it would be hard to share eulogies because they're not linked. It's often just a Word document. Sometimes people send them to me and I like to read them, but it's not as published. And so I don't know, I'd have to build some kind of database. People have asked me about pet obituaries too and doing something different for that. But right now, my organization, so to speak, is absolutely bare bones. And it's all I can do to keep up with it. So I don't know. That's where it is.
All right, Mary, thank you so much for visiting with us and telling us about your ventures. And we look forward to seeing you on Instagram and on Substack here and a little bit on TikTok. But thank you
Yay.
so much. It's been
My
great.
pleasure. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks to everybody who joined. This is so fun. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, guys. See you.
Bye.
Bye. I don't know how to end it. How do I turn this off? Help.